Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I want to thank everyone for joining today. Today's webinar is going to walk through a topic that I believe is one of the biggest underlying reasons a company ultimately becomes an Enfos customer, and that is having an enterprise business mindset and how they approach their remediation program. Roger and I spend a lot of our time with executives in this industry, and the ones that have this mindset tend to be more audit ready, are spending more of their time on high value strategy, and are generally better equipped to answer tough questions that they get from their senior leadership. So let's get right into it. I will be your host for today. Next slide. Oh, Roger, are you sharing your slides?
Yes.
Okay. Just a couple logistical items before we get going. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be sent to everyone within the next day. All callers are default muted, so we encourage you to please ask questions in the Q&A tab in the Zoom control panel. Time permitting, we'll answer as many questions as possible live at the end, but we are going to keep this to 45 minutes. And then also in the Zoom control panel, you'll see an option for captions. You can choose any language that you would like the translation to be from English. Next slide.
Okay. Mike, are you seeing the slides?
I am now. Yep.
Okay.
So many of you today are already customers or users of Enfos. Some aren't. So we'll have contact information at the end of the slides if you're open to starting a conversation. But I'll just give a brief overview here. Enfos is a cloud software, and we help organizations manage all of their project, financial, and environmental data around their environmental liability projects in one place. So this includes remediation, reclamation, and asset decommissioning. And the one thing I'll say here about our customers is they are using Enfos to manage their entire program, not just one or two projects. And it really enables them to look at their program from an enterprise viewpoint. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Roger is a co-founder of Enfos, currently serves as our president and chief operating officer. He has over 33 years of experience in the field and started his career as an environmental consultant. Roger has both a bachelor's and a master's in geology, in addition to an MBA. Roger?
All right. Thank you, Mike. And again, we appreciate the first-time participants. We have many first-timers on today's webinar, and we have a very large group of people that have joined many webinars in the past. So we appreciate those that keep coming back for more. All right, today's agenda will be first kind of discussing what the enterprise mindset is and what it isn't, why it matters in the remediation business function, key practices of an enterprise mindset, and I'm going to use a tool that all of our existing customers have seen, and it's called a capability maturity model. We have about 7 of them, but we're going to walk through one of them specifically around reserve management. And it's a tool that we use during our workshops to help evaluate a current state or an as-is within a business function, compare their key practices and their supporting information technologies to best management practices from customers that have implemented an enterprise solution, particularly Enfos, for their environmental liability management. And that would include their remediation liabilities, and for many of our customers, also their asset retirement obligations. And because we're a software company, we're also going to talk about information technology and how the enterprise mindset can really come to life when you're leveraging the appropriate technology. All right, so let's start high level and then we'll drill down as we go. So I wanted to come up with a way to, set the context for everyone around how we see an enterprise mindset. There's a lot of definitions out there in the corpus of information. And this is, one of the better definitions, and it certainly defines through these pictures really what an enterprise mindset is all about. It's definitely a business strategy, though, right? And we're going to go into details around an enterprise strategy, but it ties into the highest level business strategy that a function head for remediation or environmental health and safety would be evaluating and considering for their organization. So it's definitely strategic. It needs to be in the top priority list as a strategy for a company or an organization to take this on. An enterprise mindset is also very holistic in different business functions that help support the remediation or the decommissioning work. And you can see I've listed several of them here. Many on the call are in some of these supporting functions like finance and accounting. If you're an environmental consultant or contractor, you're in that environmental supply chain, a very important piece in this work, as everyone knows, because it's outsourced. But there's also real estate, legal, senior management, and the core remediation operations, which would be the customer's remediation team, generally filled up with project managers and other subject matter experts. And then there's a leadership organization in that group too. But the enterprise mindset really is holistic. It uses systems thinking. And as we'll talk about in more detail, it's about integrating seemingly disparate or separate business processes into one. One of the items that I wanted to talk about is this slide, and everyone will be receiving this slide deck. So I'm not going to sit here and read through all of these, but this is a very good table that shows the contrast between an enterprise mindset and what we might think of as a more traditional project management mindset. And I've listed about 8 or 9 key management activities or areas such as the purpose of the organization, the focus, the mindset, and so on. I want to point out a few that I do think are very important to bring up as you're kind of contrasting this concept of an enterprise approach versus a project management approach. The focus certainly is different. So an enterprise mindset is definitely strategic in nature. When we start talking about enterprise software that's used to support this type of a business strategy, it takes a big decision from many stakeholders to move off of spreadsheets and generic business applications. And the strategy focus is also trying to link mission, business policies and procedures that come out of the mission, internal controls. It's linking that into the day-to-day operation, right? It is strategic in nature, whereas a project management mindset is typically more tactical. Now, there are different levels of project management mindset out there. The one that we hear about periodically would be considered a PMO or a project management office. Sometimes they're called portfolio management offices, but that is a back office group that is put in place specifically to help manage groups of projects, right? And believe me, there's value in that. And I think one of the final words I want to say on this slide is it's not necessarily one or the other, because there is definitely a strong project management component as a subset into an enterprise mindset, right? But what we're really getting at here today is if I'm on the leadership team of a large remediation or decommissioning business function, how do I really want to steer my organization and my people, right? So the enterprise mindset is really the top of the echelon or the top of the pyramid in terms of how you can go about linking your corporate or your departmental strategies with your work that you're planning and executing on. I think the last one that I want to point out here is responsibility. And I am going to end this webinar talking a little bit about leadership, but it's very, very important to know that in order to consider, in order to deploy an enterprise approach for this business function that we're all focused on, that is top down, right? That is coming from the executive and the senior management team. That again, that's not to say that project managers and consultants are not an integral part, because they are. And there's always change management, and there's project execution that if you're doing best-in-class project execution, that's going to support the business performance at an enterprise level. All right, the next slide is talking about the benefits of an enterprise business model. And we do spend a lot of time with our customers as well as prospective customers that are evaluating our enterprise software. And we've done surveys, and it's very interesting. There's a lot of different prioritizations around what is the business value we're looking for. Sometimes it comes in as a little bit less quantifiable category that we bucket as strategic value. And I've listed some of the major elements of that. Strong mission alignment, right? That's one of the things I talked about earlier in terms of strategy. But you'll see some of the other ones like risk management, intra-departmental collaboration, and so on. The next big category is operations value. Now that does get down into how do we plan, execute, and monitor the individual projects that make up our portfolio. But the operations value also comes up high as a priority in the industry. So streamlining the business, doing more for less, looking for consistency and standardization, or another way to think of it is uniformity in how we do our work, eliminating low value activity, improving our resource management, and let's rely on information technology to help support our project controls, as opposed to random surveying or sampling of our procedures and the evidence of us following those. So operations value comes up very high. Financial value also. So organizations that have deployed an enterprise environmental liability management system always find financial value. They'll find those opportunities during a business capability assessment and workshop. And then many of our customers actually then after the fact will start tracking and managing realized value, like cost savings and cost avoidance through different types of categories and tracking. So we've got direct project cost savings, cost avoidance, lower overhead and management, lower technology, TCO, improved cash efficiency of reserve spending, right? That's that ratio that we talk about a lot, which is for every dollar that we spent this year on a site or on a portfolio, what was the impact to the reserve balance from the start of the year compared to the end of the year, right? So that cash efficiency improvement. And then less intrusive audits and better audit outcomes. And then finally, the information value. And, knowledge management or organizational intelligence, they have slightly different meanings in the academic world in terms of us practitioners, right? They're kind of the same, but it's people and knowledge, right? Transferring knowledge through all the years of experience of our teams to our new staff. We have people retiring now because of the baby boomer situation. So that's organizational intelligence. Strong digital security, right? 15, 20 years ago, people really didn't care. Now it's a major element in the evaluation of any software. That includes your basic business applications like email and attachments. So the digital security focus is critical. Enhanced decision-making using analytics. And then finally, maybe one of the most important points here for the future, the near-term future, is established frameworks for AI and machine learning. This is happening, and it's happening very fast. We're already involved in projects with customers, looking at their data frameworks that they've created through the years, and many of them are lacking, right? Or the information is incomplete, or the data is too ad hoc, and they're behind the eight ball when it comes to having a strong framework for AI and machine learning. So the critical role of information technology, I want to discuss a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and list these all out for you. These are the four that I'd like to mention today. So integration and automation of data flow that drives your processes. This is a very important piece, right? Because decisions are getting made, budgets and plans and forecasts are getting made, documents are being written, maps are being drawn, everything is digital, and there's data flow and there's process around that. So integrating and automating as much of that as possible is really enhanced or enabled through information technology. Risk management, security, and compliance, I've talked about that. Data governance that gives rise to connected thinkers. This gets back to this organizational intelligence concept that is maybe version 2 of knowledge management, but connecting your people and teams not only in their direct transactional and communication management, but in the information that they're collecting in the course of them doing their work. This is creating connected thinkers. There's clearly a best way to do that versus just saying that we have a knowledge management strategy and we're going to share documents. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the collaboration in a single system with all stakeholders, including suppliers. That gets back to the very first slide. You have all these various business functions and teams that help support remediation and decommissioning work. And the work is outsourced. So you've got your internal stakeholders and you have your environmental consultants, labs, and contractors. So these are four of the major critical roles that information technology plays when you're considering or when you're deploying an enterprise methodology. All right, so now we're going to start drilling down a little bit deeper into our domain, which is, in this case, environmental liability management. And an enterprise mindset has end-to-end operating models as part of their core tenet. So for reserve management, let's just dissect that a little bit. And I am focusing on the financials here, but let's face it, in front of those financials is environmental data, it's hydrogeology data, it's risk assessment data, it's feasibility studies and site characterizations. So there's a tremendous amount of content that goes into these financials. Just even managing our known liabilities from a location and an area of concern basis, our watch lists, our closed sites. So there's a strong portfolio management area that is part of this, but I'm not covering that today. But for the end-to-end financial process for reserve management, it's plan to spend, right? If you think about it, we're doing forecasting and budgeting, and we're reforecasting almost continually because conditions change, projects move into different phases, milestones are met, regulatory decisions are made. So we're constantly doing forecasting and budgeting at the highest level. We have to go out and execute work. We're going to retain consultants and contractors to do that work. That involves proposal management, right? So that is going to be that's the front end to executing some of the activities that we forecasted and budgeted for. Proposals get converted or flipped to purchases. These are work commitments, right? I've committed a $100,000 purchase order to execute a scope of work that came to me from this supplier in their proposal. So this is now where we're committing work and those dollars are committed. And then there's the spend and the cost recovery, the invoices and cost recovery. The work has actually been done. It's being invoiced now. We also could be getting cost recovery from other third parties, from state reimbursement funds, from insurance companies, and so on. So those four major processes in an end-to-end operating model are linked, right? They're joined. They're all part of reserve management, because I can't do a reserve balance if I don't have my spend, right? I can't be informed on my next forecast if I don't know what I've already completed and what I've spent, right? And now I need to go on to these tasks. If I don't want to overcommit my reserve balance, I need a project financial control on my open commitments against my reserve. That's what you're seeing there under this commitments can't exceed or fall under the plan balance. And then on my spend, right, I'm controlling spend on a work authorization level. I might be controlling spend on a contract level, but I also want to be controlling spend on a budget or an annual operating plan level. And certainly I want to control spend on my life cycle cash flow forecast. So these have to be linked. And by far, the best management practice for reserve management is to do these in a single system. Now, you probably have mandated company-wide systems, but that's where technology also comes into play, because you can connect in an automated interface to your ERP systems or your purchase-to-pay systems. But all of this work is the front end to the accounting and the accounts payable on the back end. On the right there, I'm just showing that a purpose-built system for environmental liability management is following some accounting standards. And I'm talking here about the US standards for decommissioning, or for AROs, and for environmental obligations for remediation sites. But having a repeatable, system logic-based accounting function is critical for accuracy, completeness, and auditability. So this is where, within an enterprise system that's specific to a business function, you get these capabilities that you're not going to be able to get in generic software or in spreadsheets, right? So these are some examples of some automated accounting logic. Now, for those of you that manage AROs in the room, your system also needs to be able to do inflation, discounting, and unwinding of the discount through accretion. So I'm just not showing that here, but certainly Infos has that capability as well. So this end-to-end operating model is a critical element of an enterprise mindset. These are just a couple example screenshots. Having a enterprise system, you want it to be highly configurable. And the configurations are your business rules. What is our financial calendar like? When do we make accrual adjustments or reserve adjustments? Is it on a trigger event? Is it on a calendar basis, quarterly, monthly, or maybe the annual deep dive? But having uniform work breakdown structures like the phase that you see here on the left, having your planning horizons. Some customers plan on a monthly basis in the current year, or quarterly. Others just like to do the all annual increment. But an enterprise software system designed specifically for liability management gives you the ability to take your business rules and your policies and procedures and configure them into your instance of that application. And then the bottom is just a financial statement, right? When we initially recognized the liability, it was estimated at $67,000. undiscounted. We've made adjustments through the life of 8.7 million. We've spent 385, and here's our balance to the penny in real time, right? That's part of the enterprise system to help you execute your enterprise mindset. All right, 3 fundamentals of an enterprise model. I'm repeating those, but I'm doing that deliberately because I really want to drive home the major elements of this. Integrated processes. So, right, planning, forecasting, and budgeting with proposals and your work commitments and your spend, right, linking that directly. Having detailed work breakdown structures to come up with the right categorization of our activities so we can be informed, not just on what's the cost on this site, but what's the cost by phase, what's the cost by subphase, what's the cost for this unit rate item that we're buying a lot of. Second one is automated controls. Let the system enable your project financial controls, right? Delegations of authority, overspend tolerances, your data governance, including format and data validation, backup documentation that supports your financial requests and your changes, and so on. So automated controls. And then auditability. This just continues to grow in importance from what our customers are telling us. We're getting audited all the time. And to be able to go into a single system, trace a dollar of spend all the way back to its original forecast, right? With all the authorizations and all the history and the logs. When you provide that to your auditors, it leads to less intrusive audits. We've had actual auditors tell us that, and our customers. And that's a big win. So I've been talking about those end-to-end reserve management processes. There's a lot of other use cases that an enterprise approach and enterprise business application need to have. In our field, these are some of the other major examples, right? You're starting to see some technical information, property and real estate information, managing activities and milestones and due dates, your environmental data, and many others in here. So having supporting use cases in your enterprise application helps you establish those standards and those expectations within your teams and your consultants. And it's doing so in a systematic way that makes your data useful. Okay, what keeps you from from creating an enterprise roadmap? And these are 4 or 5 of the concerns, or let's call them objections sometimes, that we hear. It's never an objection of, we see that an enterprise approach to environmental liability management, we see that as being the best and most efficient and effective way of doing it. That's never the case. It's things like this. I have more important priorities. I'm not sure the cost and the effort to make this change is worth it. Our IT department won't approve it. Here's a good one. My project managers are highly experienced and they want to keep things the same. And then a lot of times it's a matter of timing. I see the value, but right now is not the right time. So again, I'm not going to go through all of these. Maybe the one that I want to share with you is the top one. I have other more important priorities. So, here's the viewpoint that we have in a lot of, kind of offline discussions with the leaders of the organizations that we work with. And it basically comes out like this. You're the leader of a multi-million-dollar per year cost center, right? That's the remediation and or the decommissioning function. Sometimes it's hundreds of millions of dollars, and in some cases it could be $1 billion per year cost center. But they're big cost centers. We have some customers who maybe their cost center is $5 million a year, but that's a big enough problem for them that they want to be efficient and effective about planning and executing on that work and managing that risk. So the question we always throw out there is, doesn't your business function, doesn't it deserve to be running on a modern technology, right? This application that's purpose-built for liability management and asset retirement obligations. Because it's a cost center, and it always has been a cost center, right? You might not be able to make the top of the IT priority list unless you push for it. So this is just an area that isn't technical. It's very subjective, but it's certainly true. Like, what can you do to help raise the priority of at least evaluating an enterprise management system for environmental liabilities? Okay, the next slide is going to talk about the timing. I see the value, but right now is not the right time. Because this is what we do every day, and we've been doing it for about 24 years, we've really kind of crafted this at a high level, right, in terms of a journey. There's a rationalization stage, kind of to start out with, which basically means I think there's something out there that can help us do our jobs better and have better performance as a business function. That's rationalizing. Then there's project planning and project readiness. And then there's execution on an enterprise approach. The one that I want to highlight, you see that there in the rationalization lane, and it's called Business Capability Workshop. So one of the issues was on the previous slide was I'm not sure about the cost benefit, right? I get it. I see how this end-to-end operating model it makes sense. It's logical, but I need to evaluate the cost benefit. What we have is a business capability workshop that sometimes also is followed up by a proof of value program. We call it a small scale implementation. But the business capability workshop, that helps you answer that question. Is there a business case? What is the potential return on investment if we were to do this? So, right, is the squeeze worth the juice? So if that's where you're at, you're still rationalizing, you're still thinking about this as the leader for your function. This is a step that we've done 50 plus times over the years, and it's a very well-oiled machine, and it gets right down to the heart of it. Is there a benefit to implement this in your program? Okay, now the other steps are just as important, right? Because this is a big decision. I tell a lot of the executives that we're working with, this probably will be the only one decision of your entire career in remediation and decommissioning where you're going to say yes or no to an enterprise management system for this, right? Because if you get it right, you're not going to have to do it again. All right, that business capability assessment has several aspects to it. Interviews, discussions, drilling down into the as-is process, talking about best practices from your industry as well as other industries that also have contaminated soil and groundwater sites. So the capability maturity model it's an evaluation technique. And we didn't invent it, but we've repurposed it for reserve management. We also have this for project portfolio management, for purchase to pay, which is basically vendor proposals to spend management. We have this for environmental data management. We have it for remediation compliance management. So we have several of these. But for reserve management, which has really been the basis of my talk today, this is an example of the capability maturity model. What you have here is you have 10 key practices listed. So as we're going through the as-is processes, and we're talking about the process as well as the information or the content that drives those processes, we're asking about how do you do these things, yes or no? If no, why don't you? Have you considered it? And here's some benefits. If yes, it's how do you do it? And So we go through those in detail, and we end up giving a rating. And the rating is really a maturity level rating. And the lowest rating is basic. A moderate or medium rating is called managed. And a high rating is called optimized. What's interesting about this is many times the customer or the prospective customer, they have great documentation about their reserve management process. Best workflow diagrams I've ever seen, right? Great documents, and it all looks good. And then you go to talk about the technology to support it, and it's a bunch of spreadsheets, right? Or it's some mocked up SharePoint site, right? That's primarily for document management and document flow with maybe a few custom fields here and there. Our lens is not only the business practice, but on the technology to support that. We find in general, there's about 12 different software applications and usually hundreds and hundreds of spreadsheets that are used to do this job. And it makes it very, very inefficient and ultimately not very effective. So this is just an example, right, of part of that evaluation process and these key practices that we're looking for. It's in that business capability assessment step that we looked at on the journey earlier. So to wrap up, I think instead of doing a summary, I really wanted to kind of talk about some classic or traditional quotes that I think apply to this. So Michael Gerber and Peter Drucker. I like the first one, Michael's, because it talks about the people side of this, and that, we lose people through retirement, through transfer, through poor performance. Sometimes we're just asked to do a reduction in workforce, right? Or not to fill positions that have opened up through retirement. And it makes a lot of sense, right? Systems run the business and people run the systems. People come and go, but the systems remain constant. Now, if you're not using a modern digital platform for your environmental liability management, you probably don't want your systems to remain constant. But for the Infos customers, those systems remain constant and people come and go. Consultants come and go. The next one is really about decision making. And ultimately, isn't that what leadership is? It's about making decisions by looking forward. Where do we want to be? Where do we want to go? And what have been the pitfalls and the successes that got us up to this point? And believe me, Drucker is still relevant today. He was definitely a man before his time. But whenever you see a successful business, someone made a courageous decision. And I can tell you that the leaders of the remediation and decommissioning business functions that evaluated and selected Infos, they fall into this category, definitely. And we're thankful for that. And then I'll leave you with your Chat GT prompt of the day, if you want a little bit more information. And I did this one because I use chat a lot for research and just getting general information, but this is a pretty good one. It gives you the pros and the cons and what your alternatives are. But is enterprise software for a specific business function the best way to run your business? It's kind of a loaded question, isn't it? But try that if you're using chat or any other generative AI system. And with that, we will do questions and answers.
Yep. Thanks, Roger. So we've got some questions that have trickled in. We're going to get to many of these we can live. Before we do that, I just kind of want to tie everything together. So, Roger talked about that typical buyer's journey a couple slides ago, and one of the items there was the business capability workshop. This is actually one of the questions that we've got, so this will answer that. So this is an Infos-led 1 to 2 day workshop that does a deep dive through your current as-is approach and processes, during which we share with you best practices that we see from your peers. We document everything that we hear, including potential areas where Infos could help. And then we give this all to you as a deliverable, and it also includes a business case to kind of show you the potential cost savings and strategic value that you would see from adopting this approach. But even getting to that point where a workshop makes sense, like Roger said, it takes time. It all starts with a conversation. If you're on the webinar today, as we mentioned earlier, you're going to get the slides and recording. That'll come out within the next day. Many of you on the call are not customers, but you're already in varying stages of engagement with us here on this graphic. But some of you we've never spoken to. So Grace, who is on my team, and I will be following up personally. The purpose of that would be to schedule an introduction. It takes about 20 minutes. We learn a little bit more about you and your role. We'll share a few industry trends we're seeing, and then at the end, decide if it makes sense to talk further. Regardless, if we decide to take it any further, our conversation's probably going to get you asking different questions of your teams, both internal and external.
Okay.
So questions, Roger. So our consultants provide us with remedial options and lifecycle costs. How could Enfos support that step in our reserve process?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. Um, and many of our customers, current customers, that's the way that works because it is outsourced, and the consultants have the expertise, and they're basically the general or the prime on the sites that they're assigned to. So the first thing I would say is that an enterprise mindset involves your supply chain because they're a key stakeholder. They're basically a strategic partner in this work. So through Infos, you're providing them with permission-based access, which links to their roles and responsibilities that you define. So if you are a consultant and you're in an RI and you're moving into an FS as an example, and now you're coming up with remedial options or remedial strategies based on the risks of that property and the technical information. Their Infos is actually used to define by the consultant to define the scope, define the costs associated with that scope, and that can be for the full life cycle, or it can be up to a certain milestone or a certain phase, depending on really what your policy is around that. Not only that, the consultants can provide alternative scenarios, right? Based on different technologies, based on different regulatory outcomes, based on different property uses. But the point is, your system should allow for alternative planning and strategy scenarios so that your team can then review those the same way on every single site, right? Following the standard work breakdown structure, same type of cash flow forecast timeline, same kind of decision support backup documentation. So that's a great question. And the way that I answered it is to say yes. Many of our customers have the consultants basically take the first pass at what the strategies are going to be and what those cost options are. And then ultimately, through collaboration, the team's going to select the approach. And then that becomes what we call the default scenario, right? That's the one that you're going to be working off of until something changes or new information comes up. But a very important and key part of the end-to-end workflow model.
Great. Thanks, Roger. Here's another one. F&A, which I assume is finance and accounting, plays a big part in our overall reserve process. How can they leverage Enfos?
Okay. Yep. Great question. We got some connected thinkers out there. I appreciate it. First of all, they can have user accounts also. Again, they're going to have certain roles and certain responsibilities, certain approval authorities, or maybe just sign off. Generally, though, they're driving the quarterly and certainly the annual reserve updates. And a lot of our customers call these different things. These could be called the accrual, it could be called the environmental obligation, or the remediation reserve, or the ARO. They're driving that process. So they're setting a financial calendar. They're setting business rules, like if we've got a booked reserve on a site and nothing's changed, do we set a minimum time frame where a pair of eyes need to go on that and hit reapprove, even though nothing's changed, right? Other than the calendar. So there's they can play a very, very important part of that. There's really kind of different approaches on it. Sometimes finance and accounting is just there to get the numbers, right, from the team, from the remediation or the decommissioning or closure team. They get the numbers, they're in nominal dollars, and then finance and accounting does their accounting treatments or accounting methodologies. Within Infos, those accounting treatments can be performed in a systematic, logical way, right, including escalation or inflation, discount rates, managing discounting and discount rates for some or all of the portfolio, maybe depending on the type of liability it is, and then also calculation of accretion, right? So that accounting logic is embedded within Infos with a lot of different rules and configurations on how each company might implement those activities. So you can have the nominal or today's dollars. That's the forecasting and budgeting and spend management part of it. But you can also have all of the net present valued and accreted numbers as well. And that means that finance and accounting, they are users of Infos, right? Just like the remediation team and just like the environmental consultants, as I talked about earlier.
Great.
One last thing I would say. An enterprise system should do consolidation and roll up instantaneously. That should not be an exercise of data validation, of versioning of spreadsheets, of linked workbooks. That should be happening inherently in the application itself. And we go about that, our customers go about that using a hierarchy structure, right? All the way down to an individual area of concern. You might call it a project, you might call it an OU or operating unit, but at the very lowest level, that is the liability object. That rolls maybe to a location or a facility, because some of those have more than one. And then that location or facility can roll up into some kind of a business or geographical structure for roll up, for consolidation and roll up purposes. That's a critical piece that finance and accounting does a lot.
Great. And Roger, so we're technically at time, but I just want to hit one more question because it's a good one, and then we can wrap. So we've been managing our portfolio for decades. We have sites in various phases of their life cycle, including late stages. Is it ever too late to implement an approach like this and still see strong benefits?
Mike, you should answer that one. Well, the answer is no, it's never too late. And what we're seeing now that, sites that were previously closed are reopening. Everyone here knows about the big elephant in the room with PFAS, PFOA, other emerging contaminants or emerged contaminants. Regulations change, and they're going to continue to change, right? That's one aspect that helps me say no to that. The other is, you may think you're on cruise control, but maybe one day you won't be, right? A lot of this has to do with how active is the operation, right? Are you getting new projects, new liabilities through your company's business operations? Are you doing acquisitions? Are you merging? There's a lot of factors involved in that. But even if you have a straight up long-term monitoring O&M portfolio, there's value there. There's definitely value there, because you're going to streamline something that you think might already be streamlined. Now, we would still want to do a workshop and a capability assessment to determine if there's a cost benefit. But even on those types of portfolios, very late stage, we've got customers that are seeing strong value there, right? And maybe instead of a 10 or 15% annual cost reduction, maybe they get 3%, 4%, 5%. But in today's environment, and really for any business environment, finding ways other than squeezing your consultants in your labs, because you've been doing that for a long time, but finding ways to do it better, do more for less, and ultimately you're going to get better quality work at a lower cost.
That's how I would have answered it.
I know, that's why I was going to flip it to you.
Thanks, Roger. All right. So thank you everyone for attending. Like I said, the recording and slides will go out automatically. And yeah, look forward to continuing the discussion if you're interested in doing so. Thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.